seconds. Just everybody refresh their screen. We'll give you time to do that in case you need to look at questions that are coming in.
It says live and then goes right to offline.
Same.
Yeah, I see the same thing. Let
Oh,
me
wait,
ask.
no, I've got it.
We're up, we're down, we're up, we're down.
Anyway, what I wanted to ask, whether we're online or offline, is that the only thing I've heard from anyone I've spoken to is, my moons are kind of garbage. We didn't get the rolls we wanted. All my moons are bad. Is it just because everyone has bad moons and there's no such thing as a good moon anymore and we have to adjust the average? Or is everyone saying they have bad moons so that people with good moons don't get invaded?
No,
What's the deal? Because all I hear is complaining about moons. I haven't heard a single person.
Nobody who
my moon is so fucking good, dude. My moon. Let me tell you, my moon is the shit, son.
I've seen a lot of other people's moon scans, and people with good rolls don't talk about it publicly. That is the thing.
My understanding is, from a regional point of view, maybe you guys, particularly from the Imperium, can correct me. It's that the spread between the best and the worst moons is less pronounced than it was before.
I haven't seen that overall. Again, I'm seeing from a pretty weird subset, I think. But from at least the DCU alliances, I've seen most of the moon scans. So I can say there are definitely pockets where they are fine, and the rolls were exactly what everyone sort of expected. Security status had a lot less of an impact than I think a lot of people were expecting. Which I'm not sure how I feel about, but there are definitely good rolls out there. There were a lot of alliances who were pretty happy with where they ended up with. Some of us were a little miffed, but we're figuring out ways economically to work around that. Volume is basically going to make up for awesomeness of any particular moon, which I was like, I'm really annoyed at this. And then after I looked at the numbers and thought about the logistics of it, I was like, oh, actually, this is okay.
Right. So that's what's going on in nullsec. I imagine it is hard to put moons down in a war zone or not as exciting. We know that Delve's doing well. Right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's fun. Well, that's it. Well, I'll just say it's funny that Imperium didn't have like 3 or 4 different deployments just to disrupt other people's productions, but I really think they don't care. Like, people aren't figuring it out anyway, so it's not like everybody knows what to do on day one.
So I guess so far ahead of everyone else industrially. Like, we could triple, quadruple, quintuple our production value, and it would still be a drop in the ocean compared to what Goons can push out.
Also, I mean, they didn't have to. The southeast is completely in turmoil, and was already in the middle of a war. You have the north, where they couldn't have really stopped a whole lot if they wanted to, if it had been planned out properly. And if it isn't planned out properly, they're already there stopping stuff anyways. Drone Lands is too far away from anything and already has a war, so...
My assumption is they've been putting their energy into having a lot of meta intel, so they know what everyone else moons has looked like. So their resources in that sense have gone to just knowing what everyone else is doing. And they have then assessed that it is not necessary for us to take action. And if we do, we might get stomped like in the last deployment, so better not.
Yeah, or the other one. Go ahead.
Hang on. Well, first of all, we've had this thing going on in Fountain where we're reorganizing stuff and setting up a new system. And that has kind of held some attention. And then there's been stuff going on in Curse/Catch that's if you're forming a fleet in Delve and you're convincing PvP pilots to go off with you to go do something fun, it is easier and more fun and more perceived fun to all go to Curse/Catch and do stuff than it is to try to drag him all the way up to the north to something. I mean, you can go wormhole diving and stuff, and that's fun, but it's more there. People will just sign up faster for your fleet and jump in if you say, "Hey, we're going to Curse."
Curse/Catch is pretty heckin' great at the moment.
It is.
I'm deployed to Jamunda. I'm enjoying it very, very much.
Back to the earlier point. So there's no disruption coming from Imperium. There's no disruption going into Imperium either. I think people have really just decided not to try to militarily affect the economic change that hit. So everything's just kind of the same. And I think that's pretty interesting.
Delve still gets plenty of hot dropping. People look, if you walk into a system and there are 100 rorquals mining in that system, a lot of people look at that and think, wow, this is fishing in a barrel. This is fantastic hot dropper material. And depending on how you do it, it is actually. So
it
so we
has to
still
be very hit and run rather than roaming through, though.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Don't throw a lot of big, fat, slow stuff at it, because then you'll get Theta Squad on your face with over the top supercaps. But if you go fast type thing, you can get them.
Yeah, and that's what people try to do is pluck a few here and there. They don't get too greedy and try to take out a bunch at the same time.
The general idea is...
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. The general idea is you go in and in the pack of roll calls, one of them is going to not have panic or be AFK, and then you can kill that one. And worst case, you lose your Talos fleet, but ISK-wise, you're way positive.
So is there anything to report away from nullsec in the other area, lowsec, where moon mining can happen, but is supposed to be rare?
So those I heard, lots of little low-sec pockets have had new players from high-sec try to deploy refineries, and these got predictably ganked by the locals. I've also heard from some friends of an operation where the locals are letting the refinery live and having local care bears mine the moon. I don't know how durable that will be.
That's both good and horrifying.
So that's the other thing of why I think a lot of people are not super gung-ho to go shoot structures, because it is going to create an opportunity to go kill actual ships in quantity as they exist. There's definitely that thing of like, it's better, don't kill the pond, it's better to have the, the watering hole, right?
Yeah, you farm it like, slowly. You take a little off the top every once in a while, but you let the production of those Care Bears coming into your system exist.
Everyone has their own mini Providence.
That's why I said it's that way. First of all, it's great. It's great that high-sec people are experimenting and moving into this gameplay, first of all, because it's different gameplay for them. It's interesting. And that allure to get a little more wealth coming out of high-sec by going into more dangerous waters is so important.
I think the important comparison is that Delve is embracing and loving their miners, and others have not really figured that out yet. That's really the thing that you need to take away, right? If you kill your farmers and laborers, you're not going to get any food.
I'm just going to wonder something, because as I've been going around and probing down moons in low-sec, I've only done it in like three constellations so far, but I see a lot of dead sticks out there. And I'm assuming that a lot of these were, moon mining, were mining moons. I mean, I've seen a couple Titans, so I know that they're using sticks for other things. But I'm just wondering, I've seen maybe 50, 60 dead sticks, and I've seen like 3 refineries. So I'm wondering if the output is just from nullsec is gonna go down despite small pockets here and there.
I think what I was trying to say is that the future strategy of EVE, if I'm not mistaken, is going to be, it's okay to burn your neighbors' farms and fields, but you do that to get the laborers and the actual miners and workers to potentially move to your group and to your farms, right? This is very much the Middle Ages plague scenario, where after the Black Death, the value of labor just increased tenfold, right? This is what people need to figure out. You do not shoot your local miners. You protect them at all costs.
Yeah, but I don't have any faith in humans because, and you can see this when you go to the airport, they do not work together. If you go to an airport and you're trying to pick up your luggage, everybody stands right next to the turnabout or whatever it is.
That's because people at the airport have nothing to gain by letting other people get their luggage.
Yeah. And
no, but if everybody were to take 3 steps back, everybody could see their luggage in plenty of time, take 3 steps forward, grab your luggage, and get off, out of the way.
This is true, but there is no overriding organizational structure like paper pushers in Evil 9 alliances telling you what to do.
Well, that's the Imperium got the very, I guess, dubious situation of they were forced to pay attention to their industrial side, right? Because of the military aspect of it, of we need dreads now or we can't hold space. So like they needed the threat of a dread bomb to just hold something, otherwise they would have continued to get pushed in until they got their super fleet down to Delve, right? Once they got that, now they have some flexibility, but they learned that, oh, we've got a good set of people who do something that we really enjoy and that makes us secure, and that it's a symbiotic relationship. They get lots of ships for free. They have lots of dudes in fleet. They get, this huge economic benefit, and in return, they have an empire that can form real fleets, go on deployments, and enjoy the game.
Yeah.
And the model is actually something that could be copied. It's just that no one seems to be able to or interested in doing so. It can actually scale down on smaller scales as well. It's just that people have this habitual thing of how to play EVE, and they've not picked up on how goons are doing it.
I think that it's not necessarily that. I think it's more that culturally, the large alliances that exist predominantly are those who are built around a culture of people who PvP, right? They are primarily PvPers. Maybe they have alts that do industry. Maybe they don't. Maybe they rat occasionally. But it's not built around people whose sole focus in the game is industry. Those people are not the people that historically alliances have recruited en masse. It's I want to come and shoot spaceships in Null. So your PLs, your tests, your CO2s, your whatever. I mean, while this has changed over time, predominantly big null sov alliances are alluring because you get to go and take part in big null sov warfare. And your larger industry is done by renters, and then they pay you ISK and use that ISK to buy shit from Jita. And if your renters are making stuff that goes to Jita and you buy it from Jita, whatever. It could be more efficient, but nobody gives a crap.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think the numbers we saw from FanFest a couple of years ago when Quant came out with his, here's what EVE players actually look like, and everyone was kind of astonished that, oh, we all do a lot of things, and apparently the pure pilot is kind of a myth.
Well, no, this is what I'm saying. I'm saying that this is the mindset for the organizational structure and for what has been done consciously by those alliances, that rather than obviously people make money somehow. I'm saying
it may not line up with reality, but that's what he's saying the culture is.
Yeah, I think more of that is that if you do PvP on your own, or even in a corp, or even on a small alliance scale in nullsec, you fail miserably at it, right? So you have to combine with other people who have a PvP ability at all. Otherwise, you just don't do it. Whereas industry,
I'm one of those rare PvP only pilots. It's pretty great. I enjoy it.
Yeah, no, they're totally people that do that, and like there are a lot of guys who just they whack the credit card and boom, they're flexing in and whatever, and so they don't have to do any of the farming stuff. And they're like, we plenty of those guys, and they're awesome people, and they like shoot on comms, and we love them. But overall, in general, I've found throughout my nullsec career, there's a whole lot of dudes who do stuff on the side, or they work together, or it's like, hey, I need a carrier, like, oh, I can build that. It's like, wait, you do industry? It's like, oh yeah, I've 2 full sets of BPOs for all the capital components, and I have an entire library of capital, and my super library is ME9. You're like, oh, you actually do this.
Well,
but they don't talk about it.
We'll welcome Seamus Donahue to the show from EVE University. Hi, Seamus.
Hello.
Sorry about the time change. We stuck with 1500 UTC. A lot of people are missing the time change. They'll probably show up at the top of the hour. But we're going to stay with 1500 UTC as long as we can still get guests at that time. And that may be a problem because it's 7 a.m. on the Pacific coast, which is where I am, and Carneros is. But we'll see how it works out. Okay, sorry about that program note. Let's go back to what we were talking about. But I do want to say, just to move it along, as a way of reviewing, we really don't know what goes on in Imperium. Actually, only Carneros does to some degree. So what their motivations are and how they do it really is kind of a mystery. We can assume certain things, and we talk to people from there and stuff. But if you look at what Arendis is saying in comments there, it's just that the people are following the money. It's just how is everything correctly incentivized to create this sort of thing. And from what we've seen from the monthly economic report that just came out, one thing that is definitely happening is there's a lot of mining going on inside of Delve. So part of that we assume may be it's very lucrative. And so Nosy and I were actually talking to Marathia, who works with purple fleets, and those are fleets that fight everybody but the fleet themselves. And he was telling us about an exploit or a suspected exploit that he tested, proved, turned it into CCP, and CCP on October 5th put a patch in to fix it. So that exploit, it worked something like this. You had, and I'm not telling you how to exploit because I'm going to leave some details out, but I'm telling you the nature of the exploit and how it got to work. And then Nosy can jump in and tell me, put some more detail on it, basically. But one is that you had 3 ships, a Rorqual, an Orca, and say a Porpoise. This sounds like a joke, I know. They all go into fleet together. And basically the
bartender says,
yeah, the bartender says to the Rorqual, the Porpoise gets stored inside the Rorqual with drones. The Rorqual boosts, the Porpoise jumps out of the Rorqual and releases the drones. The drones float in space and are disowned, and Orca picks up those drones and reboosts them, and reboosts them, and reboosts them. And uses them to mine. And so what's happening there is that you're getting an Orca that you should be able to mine as much as maybe one mining barge that is now mining.
The other one, right? It's linked to the other drone boost.
Yeah, all the boosts stayed, and they're stacking without stacking penalties. So what you're having is an Orca that's mining not at the barge rate, but mining at 6 times the Rorqual rate, which is much higher. And to put that in perspective, you're able to take out an enormous, I think it's classified as enormous minefield in about an hour and a half.
That's very similar to a bug that was ages ago where people were boosting the damage on I think it was either VNIs or rattlesnakes, and they were getting
rattlesnakes and
damage.
Yeah, rattlesnakes especially.
And then people just gate camp, and you just volley anything that came through with functionally infinity damage rattlesnake drones.
Right. It has to do with drones and
drone.
boosts.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think actually a long time ago you had the ability to siege drones if you were in a dreadnought. That was a while ago, though. All this has been fixed. You can't do it anymore. It's proven that you can't do it anymore. But this has been happening, we suspect, for anywhere from, spring to last fall.
It's fixed, but it's a problem that continues to keep recurring. So there may be something a little deeper in.
So let's talk about that. What's the nature of that problem? I think, Nosy, you were going to talk about how people who are quality assurance people for other video games can find exploits in video games pretty easily because they know where to look in the code.
Well, it's not in other video games. It's just if you're a QA, if that's what you do for a living, and you're just, you may have a list. It's like something that you do at work, so you can do it at home. You know all the things to do. It's not that you know the code. It's that because you can gather a list of exploits. And you can just go ahead and have your list of exploits that were really good. And when a patch comes along, or maybe on Singularity, you just, before the patch is deployed, you just go ahead and you test all the exploits and see if the exploits have come back. People do that in development shops to make sure that a fix for one thing doesn't bring back a bug. So it's something that I would expect that some players are probably do on a regular basis. So it's that may be one of the reasons why game companies don't really want to give out the details of a bug, which is why on the October 5th patch notes, it's one line just says, yeah, we fixed something that might be a bug.
Yeah, a QA tester walks into a bar and orders a beer. Orders 2 beers. Orders 1,000,000 beers. Orders -1 beers. Orders an ASDF. Orders a wombat.
That's a unit testing joke.
Yeah.
I get that joke.
Right. So anyway, so that was an interesting thing. We'll have more on that with more detail. Amrathia couldn't be here today, so we'll record an interview with him later and stuff. Again, it was a patch that had been covered up, but it did account for orcas being able to mine way above their class. And it's kind of funny because since July, you can see orcas becoming, and I don't think that's related, so I won't even say, well, I will say it just because I'm not going to tease like that, but orcas prices have been going up. But again, if you're going to be doing this in nullsec, you're not going to build an orca in JITA and send it out there. You're going to build it locally. So,
yeah, and I just want to point out that he didn't do a lot extensive testing to see how many times you could redo it, because when his group was doing their testing, they got to a point where the drones could mine so much that it would just overwhelm a Rorqual's Orbe. So it was like, why even bother going any farther?
So here's my real question: how does this exploit actually end up working with mining drones when they cap out on a capacity? Not like I get that the bug is there. I'm just wondering, are mining drones currently over mining because they can exceed their capacity cap? Because for a long time, it was inefficient to use mining drones on some of the larger ores, just because if you the multiplication of it worked out, they ended up diminishing their value so much because they could only carry a block or two.
And that's a good question.
I see what you're saying. I don't know the answer to that because I don't know, but they were mining we're told they're mining at the rate of like 100,000 M3 as opposed to their 340 or something like that. So how they carry it back or how that works, I don't know. Maybe it bypasses their little storage, the
storage check. Yeah, that's one of those interesting things. There are a couple of things that should have caught this in any sort of design framework, but this is one of those things that I love about coding, where that happened.
I mean, it's just an illusion. Why. It's just an illusion that it's carrying the rocks back, right? What's happening is a little time delay. That's all that's happening.
Well, but it has a capacity check that it should be doing, and it did used to. We can all confirm that it did do that because some of us mined in high sec, and we were like, hey, these drones aren't half bad. And then we go to null sec and start mining Arcanor, and you're like, oh, well, these drones suck.
They can hardly carry anything.
Yeah, because the travel time becomes a real factor when you're losing half of your yield, basically, because it won't mine that that's 15 M3 that you have left isn't going to be another rock. Oh, well, now you've lost a third of your capacity on that run.
All right, so let's get to war. Before we get there, we're going to do a little more market stuff. Production going on in JITA seems to be high, and I would talk to somebody that told me that all they did, this is Elange, I think, who's a part of Discord for Talking in Stations, and he and I were talking, and he basically is the kind of producer that really just sat in JITA making things, and he'd figure out what was needed on the market, and he would just make it and put it out. Had no consideration for the 12% markup for producing inside of JITA, and still managed to make billions doing it that way. Instead of grabbing your materials, going to your remote location, getting all the bonuses that you couldn't get by being in more dangerous areas, producing and then shipping it back and avoiding people snagging you or picking you off on the way back to market.
The production cost is just added to the price of the items. It's convenience wins over profitability. It's a well-known factor, especially because CCP design kind of nerfed the importance or the usability of secondary hubs. So you will only have JITA as a hub and then maybe Delve.
What would fix that, though? Getting rid of ganking altogether?
I'd say getting rid of production industry index cost on player structures would help a little bit. And then another one would be to rebalance how market orders and contracts work, especially nerfing NPC stuff that way. So then they would force people to actually at least move out to offshoring just next to the hubs. So that would be the way.
Didn't the index thing originally get designed in because they were hoping to spread where all this stuff happened, and instead it's having the effect of concentrating more in JITA?
Yeah, it's because they didn't add a proper benefit. They should have omitted player structures when it comes to industry index. then they would have had that effect. But because it didn't, then people just add the price to the cost, and it's safer to be on an NPC station.
They did add the benefit, but they took it away. It was teams was supposed to be the pull. The push was the price tag of producing locally.
Was an auction-based thing and really not.
No, it didn't work, but they had that mechanic.
Unpredictable, yeah.
Let me finish this. You had two things going on. You had one pushing you out of a certain area because the markup would get up to 10% or more. So you would want to get away from that area to produce. But there was nothing. I mean, the thing that was pulling you was these teams that would basically, people could hire out experts in certain areas and raise the bonuses of those areas. But that mechanic was scrapped. So you really only have the push mechanic now. Okay.
Well, that mechanic was, so the way it worked was it was random allotment of what was going to be there. So you couldn't plan around that. And that's the big thing for industry. You have to be able to plan around.
I think you could.
Speeds.
I think actually
it brought players. It was disrupted a lot by player behavior. So
it was, and that's probably why.
The whole thing with anything that CCP seeds that you can't calculate is not something that's going to be effectively used, especially not in industry, as Opma said.
Well, I disagree, because I think you could plan around it, and I think it actually gave industrialists active gameplay that they don't have now. You could have one base that did nothing but copying, so that's what your headquarters would be. And then every month or whatever cycle, you'd look around to see where your bonuses were for that thing you wanted to produce, and you'd send out a freighter full of production materials to that one area where you could capture the 5% bonus. And it really became a strategic place. Like, where do I put my copying headquarters or my research headquarters, and where do I have my production? And it's two different places. Now,
the design like that should have been in player hands when it comes to actually producing these teams or figuring out how to source them. It should not be sourced by a CCP seed, because then you're basically disrupting predictability and the whole benefit of being an industrialist.
I thought you were against predictability, Caleb. I thought you wanted imperfect information.
In the bottom of the resources, so things like raw materials and stuff like that, you can have lack of perfect knowledge, and the same with the composition of space. But when it comes to planning on how you produce things, you don't want random anything in there.
You want to strike gold and oil, but you do not want to have your machinery that reprocesses all of it randomly break on you or suddenly become less efficient.
Such a good analogy. All right. So anything else on production in JITA?
It ties into the whole thing with how things like cost and tax and fees, it's always going to be convenience winning over profitability, because it's just not effective to move it out. And when you have things like the ganking initiative and the limitation on how to create off hubs yourself, it's just a circular argument.
Well, so that was one way that he explained that how he did production. And I looked at it and I thought, well, at the end of the day, it all boils down to time. How much time do you have to play the game? How much is your time worth? Is it worth producing far away and bringing everything to market? I mean, is it really worth that? Or is it the convenience and the ease to produce, to get your materials out there that you can actually just play the game in a more combat or resourcing way or something else? And so it seems to me that 10%, 12%, whatever, 15% markup that JITA has may be, in the long run, the better option.
Yeah, as I was saying earlier, one of the places where you can actually potentially in the future see more of this off-hub and serviceability is somewhere like Delve, because you can have very safe logistics transporting between entities. So you could easily have like 4 off-hubs in Delve or in Goon-held space, because it's safe. That means that you have all the benefits of a safe space, of being able to predict everything, being able to organize yourself, and you don't have that in HiSec. It's the joke that the Red Frog guy used to do, saying that when he's doing logistics, that's actually at risk. When most null entities do so, it's not at risk at all.
Yeah, but as you were saying, the benefit of the one-stop shopping place is a really great place. You can see that, looking at the MER, I see that the spread between JITA and the MAR is even greater than it's been before. So everybody's going to JITA now.
All right, so we'll wrap up production and move on to warfare, the other side of the balance between creating and destroying. Probably the most active area is still the east, and that includes the north parts of like Tribute. Was it Paragon Falls? Is it way up there? And the lower part, which is, somebody help me out. Where's actually the border, the front lines?
Immensea.
Yeah, Immensea, Innsmother, Detroit, and Ethereum Reach right now.
Yes, and what are
the eastern half of the map?
Yeah, it's pretty much top to bottom eastern half of the map. It is interesting. I don't really know where the fronts are because a lot of fighting's happen around Curse, and it's happening locally that I'm involved with. But Opner, you're from the Drone Region Federation. What's going on over there?
It is a lot of the status quo as of late. It is the pace of this war has gotten really interesting, and then it's gotten fairly slow because of the mechanics. Because we all have to wait a week for vulnerability timers. So anytime you thwart a major form up, you essentially buy yourself another week of being at the same status in the war. And now we've gotten to the point where DRF blows up darkness structures. We're a little less deployed in the south, Ethereum Reach. They've, I think, as far as I know, and I've talked to FCON and all of them, they've pretty much ceded all of their stuff in the south. It's all been sort of written off in their minds, at least. So any form-ups now are, let's try to kill a bunch of stuff if we can, and if there's nothing else, we're going to lose. Serenity Initiative, Blood Covenant, and FCON have all started their movements up to drone lands and started getting into fleets and have their dudes on services with other groups like DCU and other DRF entities. So that's starting. But it's going to take time. I think everyone knows anytime you have a organization that loses a bunch of ground and changes fundamentally what they do and where they live, you're lucky to keep 2/3 of your member base, even if you plan that move and it's for the better and everyone agrees on it. You're just going to have guys that peel off and are like, nah, I like where I'm at. I'm going to see who comes in here next, or I'm going to take a break, or, hey, I didn't really like a lot of you, so I'm going to use this as my chance to go somewhere else, right? And, when you lose, it's even worse.
Yeah.
New phone, who dis?
Yeah, that's why they call it a cascade. Parts start falling, creating more pressure on the other parts, and it eventually just explodes, falls apart.
Well, that's one of those things. Good leadership mitigates that a little bit, but yeah, you can't eliminate it totally. So
well, vision, right? The leader has to basically say, "Here's the vision, win or lose. This is our path forward to respectability." I think at the end of the day, people don't want to be a part of a team that's going to be laughed at because they're so terrible. And that's an interesting thing about goons, because they immunize themselves to that by laughing at themselves early on. They don't really laugh at themselves that much anymore. They have less reasons to, but that was one of the things that was interesting about their culture as opposed to the culture of elitists and people who actually were good at this game. And
it's still part of their local culture. You still see all kinds of things set up. Okay, how can we make this more or less idiot proof? Because we have to.
Because we have idiots. Well, that's true. I don't mean it went away, but it was a very effective way of dealing with the meta of shame. And shame makes it hard to want to stick around. If you're, and this is just a fact of life, if you're in high school or whatever, you have the mentality of like, what group am I in? If that is important to you, and it's important to a lot of people, do I fit in with a good group? That sort of thing. And that's the pressure that pushes people out of alliances when things are going wrong, because people start to get teased.
Well, that's the thing. It's even that, you can't really immunize yourself against that completely, because once you get any level of success, suddenly people want that anyways. Like right now, if goons lose something, major, like it feels just as bad for them as it does for any other standard group.
It does, but if you have a narrative given through a leader, good leadership of we don't really care about that anyway, kind of thing, and that's where that comes from. Right?
Manny and some of us especially, we internalized that B team thing. It was a Reddit meme for a little while where we were split between 3 different fronts, and we just didn't have enough to deal with, some small alliance in ER. And they would post on Reddit every day, and we're like, okay, you're fighting a bunch of Renter Russian RMTer bots, right? And you guys can hear me. I'm not a Russian. Like, none of us are Russians. None of the guys they were fighting are Russians. But that was the meme, and we were like, cool. And we enjoy that.
It's psychological warfare. It's super interesting if you like peel the layers off it and stuff like that. But okay, so that's setting up FCON. You were saying FCON are they retreating or what are they doing? Anyone know?
So as of right now, they are in the Secret Razor wormhole, rebuilding and recovering. They have new leadership. Not new leadership. One of their guys has stepped up to fill sort of that void of real life that happens a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And I think Tark he was there. He was very active at the beginning of the war, and I think real life just kind of sat on him. And I've said this before in the Discord channel that a lot of times when real life gives you real pressure and things start going badly in EVE, it is a really convenient and easy way to be like, I am going to focus on what is actually important. It is a gut check moment where you're like, do I really want to put in this much time and effort into a video game? I think everyone can respect that choice. So
now, the lots made of FCON being a democracy. This is being asked by Roscoe71. And I know that the Imperium leadership, especially Mittani, laughs at democracy, saying they don't work. And he cites Brave falling apart as one example. And FCON being a democracy and losing and falling apart is another example. First of all, are they a democracy? And second of all, is really that, is the democracy model not a way to go in EVE?
As far as I know, they are. When I talk to their guys, I've never heard any of them be like, "Oh yeah, ha, democracy, whatever." Whereas, like in Explicit, we do make that joke because there is no democracy. There's totalitarian rule for the benefit of the commons, right? And I agree with Mittani on that one. It is definitely a better model.
I don't know how a democracy could work in this. I can't see it.
You're a benevolent
capitalism by its definition is a democracy. It's just a democracy of invested parties, right? And in such, the only way to have capitalist democracy would have been to improve the shares, features, and functions. And CCP left those hanging since 2004. So you never got any alternative to.
So you vote with your feet, basically.
Yeah, you vote for your leadership by staying with them. If you are in an organization, you're advocating to the leadership there. Brave was the same way. Like Brave's a democracy, that's what I feel. That's bullshit. When I was with Hero and them, they Lichten ran that place, and what he said was final, and the same thing for all of his leadership up through the chain. They never had a structure where everyone got into a meeting and like somebody could win by a vote. They had meetings where people discussed stuff, but at the end of the day, it was still what was said by the leader was the final word on it, and that was the end of the discussion.
One of the co-hosts of the Capstable F4 podcast was in the Bastard Cartel, which left the FCON coalition. And they didn't say it was democracy. They said there was just no leadership. Like everybody was arguing, and all the member alliances, they were just talking over everything. But mostly it was an unwillingness to PvP, and which is what everybody's been saying on Reddit, and everybody with the spies in the alliance has been saying basically.
I don't know if that's particularly true. I know FCON is forming 150, 200 dudes routinely right up until the end when a lot of FCs just got burnt out. But it was the constant.
Not
there was
fighting.
I mean, they were fighting when they could, but if your enemy outforms you on numbers and ship class and you stand down, that's not a dumb decision on anyone's part. But at the same time, like if you just can't win the fight, is taking it a good thing, especially if you're losing?
Well, sometimes you don't know that you can't take it, that you can't win it if you don't take it. Again, this is just anecdotal evidence from somebody who was in factional warfare before and joined. This was his first experience with the nullsec. And he did say that he was really impressed with how timid the leadership of FCON Fleece was and how willing they were to stand down instead of just to wait a bit and take the fight later.
But democracy is a rule on long-term things. It's not used for short-term things or in military operations. That's why you don't have democracy in EVE, because most things are not on a long-term scale.
Well, even in real life, democracies break down in emergency situations, right? Like,
well, most things, when you only have a democracy where you have an election and then there's a period where you assume that these people can then executively make these decisions for you. It's representative democracies, right? We do not have any sort of weird direct democracies. That only operates below the Dunbar number. So it's a ridiculous argument and discussion that there's plenty of democracies in EVE. It's just you don't notice them because they are only things that are on long-term scales, and then it's usually ending up being a meritocracy more than an actual democracy because you don't need to vote. People come to an agreement.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a narrative to say that democracy fails in EVE. I think what it is group decision making is harder in EVE. But at the end of the day, what kills alliances is dissatisfaction with, again, respect and fun value, pretty much. And
I mentioned the whole thing of the corporate shares, where you have voting mechanisms in the game. It's designed for you to be able to vote, but you don't necessarily need votes. Most of the time, the executive branch will be making the decisions until there's a need for one, and that's usually on a longer time scale.
And they make the decisions because they're the ones doing most of the work. I think that can't be lost. Like, you're not really electing the person with the best vision to go ahead and lead you. You're electing the guy that can actually get 5 or 6 guys to do stuff consistently, and you're along for the ride because you can't. So
that's pretty accurate. Activity definitely trumps any amazingness at ability outside of FCing. If you are a guy who can show up for 5 to 6 hours a day, you can be leadership just about anywhere, as long as you are not really, really dumb or just really, really cavalier about other people's time. Everything else is manageable.
And how often do you actually have a competing number of people for a specific position or role in an organization? Most of the time, there's only like 1 or 2 potential candidates to even take over a certain role. So there's not even a need for voting of any kind.
Yeah, I know. I've seen splits. Interestingly enough, the Iwan ISK versus SMA war happened because one guy that was contributing a lot to logistics of moons, and his name was Paul Woods, wanted to be a director because he felt he deserved it. He'd worked really hard for it. And the other guy was leaving, creating a vacuum. And so 2 people were competing, and he was not elected to do it, which caused bad blood, which caused a split, which caused a robbery, which caused a series of failures that led to the Casino War. But we won't go far into that. The other thing I want to say is I've been in touch with Jade Constantine. And the reason I bring that up, and he wants to do the show, so we'll bring him on soon. He's doing real life sword fighting, so he couldn't make it. But
we're going to have him on blast from the past.
Yeah, we're going to talk about. We'll have another history show. We're going to talk about oration and making speeches, and doing narratives and stuff that he was very good at way back in 2004, 2005. So yeah, we'll get to that. So anyway, I think democracy is a strange concept inside of this virtual universe as much as we drape it around real world stuff. It just doesn't hold up because you can always leave.
Well, that's the thing. I think it does hold up in that fact, and you see it a lot in corp levels, where we're going to have a corp meeting to decide what we're going to do. That is that effective democracy. And I think FCON had a bunch of corps that just did it, and a lot of them went various places, and some of them stayed. A lot more stayed than I really expected. When I was told PFED was basically shutting down and that all of their alliances were coming up north, I was like, well, I will be surprised if we have more dudes fighting for the DRF than we have fighting for Guardians of the Galaxy in the next month. Because honestly, if you're one of those low-end groups that has the chance to leave, and you can go to a place that has that level of security, your choices are Goons or Declan, pretty much, right? Yeah. So I was really shocked when a lot of that core and a lot of the people that I was really hoping would come with us stayed with us, and a lot of that's just we put in a lot of time and effort with them to try to do something that we were all trepidatious about. I don't think anyone expected to walk into Amencia, save the day, and walk out 2 weeks later. But we were very ready for the fact that we're going to spend a lot of energy here, and we're almost certainly not going to win in the long term. It would have been really hard in the long term for the DRF to hold that whole southern edge completely, just because of the sheer size of it and everything in between. Because we would have had backfill too with Innsmother and that other half of Detroit. That's a lot even for the numbers that we have. I mean, we have areas of the drone lands that just aren't occupied either, and we keep them mostly back. But
I think that the common wisdom was that when these moon changes come in, they're going to remap the moons basically. So the people that hold the most land will have the highest chances of having good moons that you want to mine. But you haven't been able to exploit that anyway as the DRF because you guys have been under conflict. So you're not really exploring moons, especially in areas that are under being contested.
Paragon and Oasa are under a real contest. Ethereum Reach we never really took full possession of it. We're gonna eventually, but it's been a battleground of sorts that always gets low attention. Spire has been pretty decent. Outer Passage, Cobalt Edge, these have all been areas that have been fine. As far as I know, Detroit's in a little harder.
Yeah.
But and Geminite's been fine as far as I know. I haven't heard anything, and Cash has been perfectly fine. So
Triumvirate basically declared we're in a full scale destroy FCON war, and are they achieving their goal, or has this totally mutated into a different type of conflict?
So as far as they wanted to destroy PFED and evict FCON, from everything I've heard in my talks with
PFED, by the way, is Phoenix Federation, right?
Yeah, FCON's coalition, and in so far as that, I guess they've achieved that goal. About half of it is left for various other groups. Some of them joined Legacy, some of them have joined other. Bastard Cartel had a Reddit post, and a couple of alliances went with them. But the top three came up to drone lands already, and a few others. The more active people so far have all come up. That's the big thing that I've seen so far. The less active people, the people more concerned about the industrial stuff, the guys that had stuff that they still had to move out or that they just weren't going to move across to hostile regions or go through Curse. I think a lot of those guys were like, no, I'll just go somewhere else. And that's understandable.
FCON had a different history than usual ex-Imperium, right? And by the way, let's look at the scorecard, right? Because you had the Casino War. And I'm going to diverge for just a second. Wrath Khatan, the Iwan Isk versus SMA War was an article that I wrote for TMC, now INN, and it detailed the nucleus of what I think became the Casino War after more conflicts folded into that. So it was it was a different war, but all these other wars kind of piled on top of it to make this giant Casino War and stuff like that. And of that war, you had FCON retreat on their own, right? And you had Circle of Two turncoat. No nice way to say that. And the guy that led the turncoating turned on CO2 and actually killed it. So it seems like and you have the casinos that funded the whole war that were maybe going bankrupt. We'll talk about that in a second, Caleb. But all those villains to the Imperium's point of view are going down one by one, right? So FCON is just the latest.
I don't think FCON was ever a villain, nor Razor. They left on very good terms with the Imperium, but they lost a branch. Ironically, two drone regions.
Terms, really? They might have been. What do you think, Carneros? You're the one inside.
At the time, well, the rule was, hey, you can leave anytime you want to. If you think that's the best thing for you people, you could do that. You know, we're not married, but afterwards, I don't know that there was. I think there was some negativity.
Well, yeah, the whole fuck FCON thing.
There wasn't as much negativity with Razor or Executive Outcomes or SMA, which are three other alliances that also left the Imperium during the Casino War, or in the immediate aftermath of the Casino War. And FCON was a little bit different. I don't know why, though. Maybe Arendis knows.
So tell us, Arendis, in the chat channel. We'll pick it up when we see it.
If I had to guess, it would be size. The other 3 alliances you named, 2 of them died, and then the Razor was much smaller in actual footprint.
Well, doesn't it seem like FCON's an easy target to pick on? I mean, Grath picks on, or did on FCON. He said his reasons were that they act bigger than they actually are and stuff. But
I mean, I don't want to speak ill of friends, but I don't think that's an inaccurate statement in a lot of ways, but there are a lot of other groups that do that too. Just all over EVE, there are always those people who, talk a huge game and don't really deliver a whole bunch. And you're like, oh, okay. And FCON does more of that. They deliver more and they talk a little less than a lot of those groups, but they're probably the biggest one that I think you could say doesn't quite deliver all the time.
Arendis points to something that I knew about, and that was that the FCON sat out a lot of stuff the Imperium was doing when they disagreed with it, because they had a different culture. And I thought that was very interesting. Like, they didn't participate in Burn Jita because a lot of their people, well, I think this is why, had people who were in production, in mining, and so they sympathized with the victims of that, pretty much.
Well, historically, they never did. That was the thing. They were like, when we sit this out, and I don't know if that was because they just had a bunch of indie dudes, or if they just didn't want to have ganking gameplay involved in their alliance.
Well, for whatever reason, this is the 3rd major opponent that's gone down in a significant way.
That's the thing. I don't know if FCON was never an opponent of the Imperium, though. So
not militarily or politically, but I think there was definitely a narrative of Imperium being hostile to FCON. Does anybody disagree with that besides Opner?
I think that takes some historical revision, because
besides Opner, does anybody disagree with that? I'm not baiting. I actually want to know.
I mean, it seems that if you have anything, you have a culture war. Would be that, because I never got the impression, like, while all the fighting was going on, that there were bad things going on. I mean, it's not like FCON was Razor, who basically disappeared, and where's basically the two memes were fuck FCON and where's Razor.
Right, but am I wrong about that? Because I'd like to know if Imperium wasn't hostile to FCON, I guess, in the metasphere.
Yeah, and is it? I mean, you can be hostile in a cultural way and not be hostile in a military way.
Yeah, pretty much.
So here's the thing. And the irony of all this is that the DRF was actually the ones that evicted, or what is now in DRF fully is the guys who evicted Razor and FCON. We were the ones that sieged Tenal and Branch during the World War B. So, like, the reason that they lost on that front is because of a bunch of guys from Dronelands. And now we're their allies, and Razor's. And if somebody had told me right before that war, hey, in a year, Razor is going to be one of your best buddies, and you're going to be coordinating with them daily on, keeping Droneland safe, I would have been like, you're dumb. But this is EVE, and people that you're fighting become your friends.
Yeah,
it was hardly surprising. People I was in Tenal as well, and at the time, and people turned code immediately there, and they were accepted within the drone walkers.
Yeah, Drone Walkers was a little bit more weirder of a scenario, just because the way it ended, or not ended, but the way its relationship with Dronelands ended.
All right, let's bring Apothny back to life over there. He's sitting patiently waiting for a chance to talk about the.
I'm very interested by this stuff, but avoid actively participating in it on a gameplay level, because I don't want to play EVE for 18 hours at a time and only press 2 buttons.
This is what you say, but your body language shows that you're like dying. So I'm going to swing it to you, and let's talk about some stuff that you're interested in. And that is, actually, I want an update on you first. What's going on with you? Like, where are you? What are you doing?
Yeah.
So I'm a member of a small roaming alliance known as Pandemic Legion. And we are currently deployed to Curse, specifically Jamunda, which is a lovely place this time of year. We always kind of come around to Curse at least once a year. We're just kind of like doing what PL does, which is generally sit on the face of anyone within 2 or 3 regions and make them do something about it, and in doing so get fights. And we've kind of continued, and we've been doing this for ages and ages now. We have not brought our big toys with us, i.e. super capitals, which means that groups are far more willing to engage us, as obviously if you have giant super capital domination, then people less want to fight you. That means that we actually lose fights occasionally, which is a new experience for PL. Like I believe we lost a couple dreads to Provi the other day. But yeah, so personally, I've been getting involved a lot more on TQ with the end of the Alliance tournament. I've been FCing again regularly for the first time in a very, very long time, which has been really, really nice. I've been doing some solo roaming as well, which is really, really nice. So yeah, just playing on Tranquility, hanging out, doing the PL lifestyle.
So are you splitting time with Faction War at all, or how's that working?
I've never done Faction Warfare stuff.
I thought you were in Adron Robotics with...
Oh, that was a running joke between me and Ashtarothi in that I put my alpha clone in there and like once a month log it in and lose Tech 1 for Atrons in FW space.
Wow, you threw me. As much as you were pumping that on the airwaves, I thought you had actually given up your PL lifestyle and were doing Faction War, and I thought, what an interesting change. But
no, I mean, if I were to move from PL to somewhere else, Faction Warfare would be high on the list because it's really great space.
Nicely put. Okay, before we get to Alliance Tournament, PL, are they taking a PR hit?
I think that the Reddit hive mind has turned against PL to a greater extent than normal, but that's kind of the same as Reddit hating anyone. It lasts 3 days to a week, and then they find someone new. Like, it doesn't really matter. I think that especially after it was a lot bigger after World War B, actually, in that goons were defeated and people had sated their bloodlust for goons for a bit, and goons were kind of patching themselves up. There was a lot of propaganda about, okay, PL are the next established power that we want to take down. Fuck PL. They always shoot people that used to be their allies and all that propaganda. So, it's swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, it seems like I think Mittani kind of focused on PL as the true enemy that was really pushing a lot of the stuff to happen. So that might have been a counter narrative, by people who are in the Imperium inside of Reddit as well. Reddit isn't one thought process. It's different groups that are kind of tug-of-warring back and forth and stuff like that.
Sure. Like I said, I generally am less interested in politics narrative and my personal gameplay. I like being in space in spaceships.
You actually like playing the game as opposed to...
weird as it sounds,
yeah.
I actually enjoy playing it online, which makes it much easier to be involved with than the people who don't play and talk about it a lot, which is still, perfectly fun.
That's where Tiberius is. I'm like, where are you, buddy? And he's like, you know what? I'm playing Eve.
Yeah.
So
I know. But does that mean that you're going to switch to PL?
Going out with NC does a lot of stuff.
Somebody who actually plays the game for the sake of the game. That's like finding a unicorn or something.
Well, he used to be a good writer. He still is. He just says, I'm not writing anymore. I don't want to take the time to research and to stay on top of everything. It's super time consuming. I actually just enjoy playing the game, going out with my Eve friend in real life.
What research?
He met through the game. Oh, he used to research quite a bit.
Just bullshit facts. Like, nobody checked.
You can do that, but that's the difference between certain writers like Rivra or Caleb or me or Nosy, especially Nosy, and people who say, this is my opinion on things. Now, there are people like Opner who have a lot of experience. You have people like Kenneth Feld and Aerith and people who just have a lot of experience that can sit down and just say, this is what I think, and it's going to be true because they have so much experience on that one facet of things.
And they're the ones doing it. So, they know.
Yeah, exactly. They're the ones moving those tides. So when they do that, it's fine, but they don't really write articles. And what you get, and I'm not throwing shade on people who write because it's really hard to write, and there are a lot of good people and stuff. If it's not researched, then you really just have your own experience to go on. And are you experienced enough to find the nuances of the topic, and that's a whole.
While it may inevitably turn masturbatory, I would love to have a kind of like a 2-hour long, maybe an episode of the CZ podcast, whenever that happens, where it's just all writers and people discuss different styles of Eve writing, what motivates them to write about Eve, how they approach writing in Eve, and kind of like the whole, specifically when it comes to writing in articles, especially as we are out of the golden era of blogging and we are more on, you write articles for established news sites with very few exceptions.
We're streaming.
Very good exceptions, like Capri Sun Cafe Foods.
Apathi, that would be interesting to about 8 people, I think.
I am one of those 8 people.
Yeah, it would be very...
The way I write, the way
no, 9 people. 9 people.
I write things that are interesting to me and exclusively me, and then I post them on CZ, and then people like Caleb go, that was mildly interesting. Could it have been 1,000 words rather than 5,000?
By the way,
Arendis now?
Yeah, Arendis actually makes a good point there that Matterall knows nothing. That's why I research so much, which is actually very true.
But no, I find writing about Eve is exactly to your point. Like, as much as I joke about not researching, I write about things that I want to know more about because it gives me an excuse to ask people and learn about them. Like, if I ask someone, hey, will you spend the next 4 hours explaining this part of gameplay to me? They're like, I have to go to work. If you say, I'm writing an article about you, they'll absolutely give you all of their time.
Yeah.
And seriously, Matterall, I do think that you should put some more value on all that meta, even though it might seem very niche, because that's pretty much the unique selling point of Eve. Whether you're talking about the market, the media, the spy games, all these things, it's what makes Eve so unique. So
there are a lot
even
of
if it's only 10 people, that's fine.
Podcast fodder to just something to have on in the car on their way to work.
I agree with that very much. I also think that it's, and this is advice that Mike Asharathi, I'm going to combine these 2 people into one person. Mike Azaria.
Like a transporter accident?
Yes. Star Trek transporter accident. Mike Azaria said, he gave me some speaking tips before Eve Vegas, and he did a great job, by the way. You should go find that video of Mike Azaria on winning Eve. And he said, remember, first rule is it's not about you, it's about them. And so then what we're doing now and what a show like that would do would be very self-indulgent about what we do. But what I think all these people that listen to this want to know is what do we know, not what do we think? Because they want to improve their game. That's the reason people are listening, right? And also they have.
I don't agree with that.
All right, well, we'll talk about that at a different time. But I want to hear about the Alliance tournament stuff. Shoot.
Sure. So this isn't directly Alliance tournament, but Angry Games 3 was cancelled due to issues with the Thunderdome server. Because for those of you that have been living under a rock for the past 2 weeks, along with many other CCP devs, we no longer have CCP Logibro. And Thunderdome was his kind of baby. He pushed it, he ran it, he did everything for it. He was the EVE Online tournament director. Like, that was his thing, along with the many other hats he wore, like CSM coordinator and blah, 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 everything else. So that meant that the Angry Games guys were expecting a specific rule set to be available on Thunderdome so that you can check fits against what's banned and not banned, and it does the points for you. We have a setup for that for EVE-NT, which we've been running for our current season. But because Logibro left, it wasn't set up. The other devs don't know the arcane magic to necessarily set up Thunderdome or have the time to learn it in time. So CCP, basically none of the other devs have the raw experience in tinkering with the Thunderdome server that CCP Logibro does. So, I know that the Angry Games staff had already been in quite a lot of trouble anyway. For example, I believe that this could be false, but I believe that they'd hadn't found anybody to stream it and do the tech side for the tournament, which meant that they'd asked to offload that responsibility to the EVE-NT plus 10 crew. So I think we were going to end up producing it from that end, but they'd still obviously be running the reffing and the rules and organizing the teams and what have you. So I know that they were already in trouble. So it may be the case, and this is hardcore meta, that it was falling behind the scenes anyway, and this is just a handy excuse for them to stop running it. But that's probably slander and false. But no, so yeah, basically TD couldn't be run because CCP lost Logibro, so they had to cancel the tournament for now.
Well, it seems like an easy win, though, because if you cut internal staff, you can farm this out. I mean, it just seems like it was, they've done it before. The Alliance tournaments before, I believe, were farmed out.
Well, this is the Anger Games, right? This isn't the AT itself.
I'm sorry, I meant all these things, though. All these this whole tournament section of the game.
Well, yeah. So that's been done, but basically, when it comes to Thunderdome, which is the best thing to happen to EVE tournaments possibly ever, it still requires a dev to set up the access list. And basically, you need to set up the access list. If you're doing a specialized tournament, you need to have a dev put in the specialized rule set, and you also need to have a dev keep it updated to whatever the most recent EVE patch is. Like, those are basically the 3 tasks that CCP just cannot and will not hand off to players, because obviously it leads to way too much risk on CCP's part. If that is done, if that level of maintenance is done, players can do the rest of it. For example, when we had Falcon on last week, he said, well, we have less staff at the AT. I want to do the entire production from Nottingham, from the EVE NT cast. So last year we did the first 2 weeks and CCP did the second 2 weeks. He wants to do all of the next tournament from the EVE NT crew, and CCP just ref it and organize and do that kind of stuff, which would be really cool. Kind of sad in a way, but also kind of cool. And then, so that's kind of what's been going on with tournament stuff. And a lot of people are very scared for the future of the tournament going forward, as this is a very bad sign of Thunderdome. Like, there have been rumors that Thunderdome might even be shut down completely after, EVE NT finishes, because CCP don't want to run it anymore. But that's all rumors, we don't know.
I really hope not. Yeah, honestly, Thunderdome was more fun than actual AT this year. We did the entry section, and we had vastly more fun doing that and losing both rounds than we had in our previous 2 years of actually winning AT matches.
Yeah, the Thunderdome is an extraordinarily valuable thing to a non-insignificant part of the member base. In terms of what CCP would have to do to keep it updated, which it's very easy, and players say all the time, CCP just change a few numbers and it's fine. But I genuinely believe the amount of value it adds to the number of players that interact with it, directly or indirectly, Thunderdome is definitely worth keeping, even if it's not actively developed on.
I was talking with somebody about this, and there's a matter of this initial investment. Like, if CCP gets the tooling in place to maintain it easily, that's a pretty big upfront investment. But then everything after that is pretty minimal. But while they had Logibro in place, they could keep that very low initial investment, and they just needed that one specialized guy who could work arcane magic, right? Yep. And now they've inverted that, and we don't know if they're going to put that real investment they need to into it to keep it going. I think everyone in this room probably agrees it's a good thing, but we don't know.
I very highly doubt, it's not impossible, but I extraordinarily doubt that AT itself will be cancelled. For example, I'm fairly sure that CCP Fozzie currently has breath in his lungs, and for that reason alone, the AT were not able to be cancelled. So I think there will certainly be an AT next year, but I think that in terms of the organization, the support for teams, possibly what CCP gives to the AT in their time is going to be fairly vastly reduced compared to AT15 and possibly what we were expecting for AT16. That may be a case of they just push it out to the player base. As we said, they might run it all from Nottingham, but Logibro is a huge loss for the tournament community.
With Logibro being gone, from that point on, do you actually think that it's a bad thing that they shift the AT to more of a player-run event, and that it kind of goes back to a more minimalist thing?
I think that if we can have Thunderdome that gives players the tools to do it themselves, and I would still like the CCP Run Alliance tournament with the prize ships and the skins and whatever. And some people are saying in chat that doesn't add any value to the game. There are a lot of people who just play the game because of tournament stuff, and for people who can't play the game because they're busy but still watch the tournament, it's a way to keep a lot of players engaged, and I think that's more players than people expect. And further, in terms of monetary value, the tournament-specific skins, so the EVE NT skins and the skins they released for this year's tournament, I know for a fact are some of the best-selling skins in CCP's history of selling skins.
Also, there's the factor of it is like live events. You could say live events give no real tangible value to the game, right? Because so few players can interact with them. They're, when they do get a lot of players who interact with them, it's a failure. There's a lot of, lost servers, and it's a cluster. But whatever, at the end of the day, it's something that people really enjoy. It gets engagement. It gets people doing stuff. It's a way to introduce unique items like the skins and the AT ships. And honestly, I have more buy-in. We set up to do Event. We had to cancel because of the Darkness War, and we do AT every year. And honestly, I get more buy-in and more consistent commitment from guys logging in, and guys that are once a week players turn into daily players to prep the tournament because they enjoy it.
It gives the real content makers behind the scenes, the FCs, the logistic guys, it gives them another thing to do in game. There was a really great talk done at Amsterdam by something like Babby1801 or something. I believe it was him. He did a really, truly wonderful talk about the AT from a player and a team captain perspective. And it does give all these people who are running things throughout the year to time off to do something different. But yeah, I would... To save rambling and standing the show, I would just say that there are a myriad of reasons why the tournament scene is good for the game, is valuable, and is worth some level of maintenance and investment by CCP. I'm not saying that they should make a dev team for the tournament. That would be dumb. I'm saying having one guy whose part of responsibilities it is to keep TD online and talk to the tournament community, keep things updated, that absolutely is you will get more than you put in.
I'd like to ask if Carneros has a point on this, on what would another company invest and be willing to invest to actually create something like the meta that the tournament is? Because what is the valuation procedure of something like that? Do you think it could work in other games?
Who's that question for?
For Carneros, because I as a unique thing in EVE, I've not seen anything remotely like this in other MMOs or in other games in general. What would be the valuation? Because now we're talking about the whole, what is the value of the game? And even Fozzie said, yes, it is actually considerable. But if you start looking at things like the promotional value, the marketing value, the engagement, and the player retention value, all these things, if you start stacking them up, they're not easy to calculate or prove from a numbers perspective, but they are considerable. And I say, like Arendis did, it's bigger than the actual the promotion budget of EVE in general.
You can sit down and go, what can we actually afford to spend? And how much is it going to cost if we do it like this? And is that inside or outside of our budget? That's actually doable. Last weekend, I was away from the show because I went to attend BlizzCon in Southern California.
That's BlizzCon, the makers of World of Warcraft.
BlizzCon is the annual event from Blizzard that is basically what EVE FanFest is for CCP. But it's not just World of Warcraft. It's also, a lot of it is Overwatch and StarCraft and Diablo and all these other games as well. And they have tournaments going up as part of that. Heroes of the Storm annual finals or whatever. World of Warcraft, I can't remember which, Battlegrounds. No, not Battlegrounds. The other Arena. And then there's Overwatch and all these other tournaments going on. StarCraft one's huge. They choose to overspend, and they've got, admittedly, a lot of discretionary income to spend on this, more than CCP has. Whether or not Alliance Tournament or a smaller one like Event or Anger Games or something like that can be valuable for the company has a lot to do with how was the game originally designed? Does it happen to really lend itself to an esports? Is the audience one of those audiences that loves esports? And if so, are they? Does that energize their actual normal gameplay, or is this a side thing that they just watch? Do they monetize around it? Does it enhance the prestige of their main product or service? Blizzard thinks yes. And, Blizzard's investing hugely in this. CCP is a different story. This game was built a long time before esports became a commercial thing.
Yeah, I think it also has a different nature. Not only that it's an MMO, and that it's niche or whatever, but the players who are kind of good at EVE that you can make celebrities of aren't the ones that can show up in Austin, Texas for tournament play, like LOL can.
I think ever having the ambition to turn EVE into what we might consider a true esport, your StarCraft, your League of Legends, even me, one of the a tournament madman,
very photogenic.
That is dumb. Like, don't ever put your hopes in making EVE a proper esport. Like, not a thing that can happen. But the tournament stuff that we do, to the level we do it at, that is sustainable and adds value, I believe. You do not have to be the next League of Legends to have your esports scenes be valid. In the same way that EVE Online does not need to have the subscriber count of World of Warcraft to be a valid and worthwhile MMO that is worthy to keep developing.
Well,
it works a bit like real life Formula One, right? Everything Formula One develops ends up in end consumer technology. And it's a little bit like that in EVE, right? The gameplay and the whole organizational stuff around the tournaments are a little bit like Formula One activities. They consist and continue year after year, and every time the developers can actually use the data and the activity to change things in the game and improve it.
Well, I was going to say that aren't there developers that distill certain games, like you have LOL came out of World of Warcraft, the distilled raid experience, pretty much.
Dota did, and then
Dota, okay,
was a clone basically of Dota simplified. But at the end of the day, you have tournament play is interesting because it is a instance-based gameplay in a game that is strictly designed against instance play, right? And I think that's the true value in it. When we all worry about the day where CCP creates this instant gameplay and that it will somehow kill EVE's culture, right? And then we all celebrate AT. So we have this dichotomy there.
We don't all.
Well, I think most players, nobody can look at the AT and be like, oh, well, we should totally just get that out of the game because it's against.
Recently become opposed to the AT, actually. Well, I'll explain that in a minute, but go ahead.
If you look at the people watching the AT, if you look at the numbers, what we get on the AT weekends, it's 25% of the average logged in players on a day-to-day basis will watch the AT.
Yeah. And they're not the same people.
And that's ignoring VODs.
And they're not the same people. Like, for example, I know it's just anecdotal evidence, but my son's been seeing me play EVE Online for years now. And I've been doing the AT the last 3 years. And once I was watching the matches, and then he comes back and looks at what I was doing on his case room, and then goes, oh, you've got esports on EVE now. So there's definitely an appeal of the just proper match thing, even for people who are not interested in playing the real EVE.
It's more accessible, really. I think at the end of the day, to say we have
this us to the front page of Twitch, so people come and say, "What the hell is this game?" And there isn't a huge uptick of subs afterwards. I know, but it is another way to get an audience that wouldn't necessarily look at EVE to look at EVE. And we do get a small trickle of people who go, oh, this game looks weird. And maybe they join EVE and it turns out the tournament scene isn't for them, but they are then in the EVE sphere and go, oh, I actually really like, I don't know, fucking industry because I just had this contact with EVE through the Alliance tournament.
I would love to see the numbers on retention of those people who subscribe after watching AT, because I will bet you money that they are vastly higher than your average advertising.
There are several alliances, small alliances that exist, and people keep playing the game casually because they get to play in the AT every year.
Yeah. Well, the point that I was trying to make was that one group distilled the experience out of one game, and it was very successful. Also, PUBG looks like it's in a distillation of where'd that come from?
It was DayZ, which was a mod for Arma 3.
Right. So you distill the experience for that group of players, and it spins off the most successful games that we see. So couldn't that same thing be done for EVE?
No, because the Alliance tournament is also a way for alliances in the sandbox to express themselves and to partake with each other, still in the sandbox, only slightly removed. It is not completely instance. It is still very much connected, and it means that there are alliances like Hydra, like Tuskers, who in the grand scale of EVE, their stories would get lost in the mass of goons and PL and whatever, but they can still make a name for themselves, still become important players in the scene of EVE without needing to balloon and take soft.
But this is where I have a problem with the Alliance tournament. I've expressed this before. I don't feel like it's tied into the actual world. You think it is. I think there are some things that cross, right? If you do well in the Alliance tournament, you have a higher rate of recruitment for your organization because the name is out there, because there's so much publicity attached to the AT for players who are already playing the game, and I guess some that don't. So there's a few things, but really, are these teams really representative of the Alliance?
Yes.
So here's the thing, though. That doesn't speak to tournament play. The AT and tournament play are sort of distinctive things in that tournament play, I think, has more value to the player base long term than AT itself. AT has the marketing, and that is really important in and of itself. And it has the history, and it has that expression of alliances, and it is a way to compete on a relatively even keel across. And it is an expression of an alliance's ability to field a team and an FC and the coordination for all of it and to organize. And that is basically what alliances sell themselves on.
And stylistically and culturally as well.
Definitely. The advertisements do more of that too than the actual tournament play. So like that even in of itself.
I'd love to see that. I don't see that. I don't see PL's way of winning wars represented in a microcosm of how they win the tournament.
Really? I field a Taunas every other match.
Tell you that you are absolutely false. So
well, then it's not coming through. But tell me why.
So like I can do a really clear example. So Pandemic Legion, as you know, PL are good because they put so much effort into the theory crafting and abusing game mechanics and having the new best fleet comp before everyone else, right? So that was true with Abaddons back in the day to beat Drakes, and with the bringing with Hacks and Shadoo when PL came up with Slow Cats, with Manny. Like PL historically have been in the biggest theory crafters, right? They break the meta in terms of fleet combat. Then they ballooned into having a huge super capital powerhouse, and consistently the ones with the new tactics and the more effort in that way. Before 89, after 88, the P.
Look, if you had let me interrupt you because you're going to tick off some really great stuff, but let's get to the point. If you were going to have NC play a tournament and drop a bunch of super capitals on the little team that they're fighting, then it's representative of how NC fights.
No, it's not, because the super capitals is not. Super capitals, not PL. PL use super capitals because they are the abusive way to win. Then and before super capital ballooning was the big thing, PL would abuse whatever it was. It's just that super capitals are the abusive thing, which is why PL is so heavily invested in supers for their size relative to other alliances. So in between 80s 8 and 9, I believe, was the PL forums were leaked, and it leaked everything, right? But it also leaked how PL trains and how PL prepares the tournament, which very directly mirrors PL's approach to playing the game. You have many people who put lots and lots and lots of effort into the theory crafting, defining meta-breaking setups, doing testing, all the logistic effort that comes in, like I'm sure you know in NC, but NC and PL have a huge logistics backbone, which is very rarely talked about. But then also, if you compare that to a group like your Hydra Reloadeds or your Tuskers, they are groups who absolutely have theory crafters.
Where are they in the game? Do they patrol low sec? Do they have a culture of winning a certain way in low sec?
Yes.
Where's that crossover?
Yes, they do. If you pay attention, like Tuskers historically have been one of the big names of low sec solo and very small gang roaming and fighting, in the same kind of reputation of, Agony Unleashed at its height. Very small gang, very fantastic players. Tuskers and Agony both interact with EVE University quite a lot in that space in helping train people. But anyway, those are groups, and this shows in the comps that they bring as well, that they don't necessarily bring the meta-busting, this is a hard counter, we have spied on you. Again, PL very big in the spying game on Tranquility, also very big on that in the tournament. Whereas the Hydra and the Tuskers, again, everybody's involved in every facet, but the strength of the Hydra and the Tuskers is that they bring a comp that is very controlling, typically a comp that no matter what you bring, you cannot counter them, and they will outfly you, and they will outpilot you. They will, keep perfect range and keep perfect position.
It's very
PL style of flying perfectly,
clearly,
but just having the correct comp.
You see those links. I don't see those links. We concentrate on different parts of the game. This is my point. If you give me a tournament that looks like the pod race of Star Wars, where you have different creatures that represent a different style of technology, that represent different tactics, it's instead of the same color of Tinker, doctrine that's out there, that's what the tournament is, right? Everybody figures out what the best doctrines are, and then they use them. There's a couple surprises, not a big deal, but you don't have a whole stylistic change of, it's Shadow Cartel. These guys, this is how they live. This is how they fight.
So totally. So Shadow Cartel were a team especially in their first couple of tournaments before their team was like axed and moved elsewhere. They were a team that focused on very all-in setups that are either very, very, very heavy damage or very, very, very heavy defense. They brought really, really polarized setups. And I think that your problem is your bias is because you personally love the political metagame of EVE. That is what you spend your time looking at.
I like the story.
Those are the people. The story of that, which is why you know all this stuff about the tournament, about that part of the game. But because of your only recent interest in tournaments, and because you aren't somebody who knows about the groups in LowSec, you don't live in LowSec, you don't know those people as well, your Tuskers, your Hydra, whoever, that many other people will do, that means that you don't know their style and their personal, and therefore when you watch the tournament, you don't see that in them. And that's part of the job of the commentators to express that, but it's also just because where you are and what you do in the game. Like, even when I was in EVE Uni, I didn't know what the tournament was. I didn't know, I wasn't PL, I wasn't Waffles. I knew about Tuskers, I knew about Agony, because those were the people I interacted with. And I think that when you watch the tournament, there will be some alliances that because of your interaction on Tranquility, and you'll roughly know how they work. They will have their own reputation, and you can apply to some extent that ethos and that culture into their tournament team. Now, in some cases, tournament teams do tend to be 20 guys who are functionally a different alliance in very rare cases, but it is almost impossible to remove the culture of the alliance from the culture of the
come up
team.
with stupid immersive breaking names, like they're taunting us through the name of their alliance. Like, that's what's turned me off. It's I want to cheer for an alliance. I want to cheer for a play style. I want to see Wormhole guys have Wormhole style gameplay that's different from LowSec style gameplay, and see those collide. Because if you can't attach me to a hero,
Wormhole teams always have like this really weird, slightly off meta stuff. Like if you kind of talk in tournament circles of people who are engaged in the tournament, you will hear about all that stuff. But it's much more difficult to see in the same way that if you don't talk to anyone from nullsec and you just literally go on fleets and don't even listen to your other fleet mates, you wouldn't see the meta game as much. Like, we're in ships, they're in ships, so what, big deal.
This is the thing. The tournament has to be fairly consistent across the board for the rule set to be accessible for the average player and for people coming in off the street who don't understand the game at all, really, right? That's the appeal of instance-based and tournament play, right? So you have to have some commonality. There's going to be a rule set that everyone has to follow. That is going to dictate what is, going to win. And there is that deeper level where when you compete in the tournament for a few years, or, you watch it religiously, like some other people, or if you're betting a lot of ISK on it, where you're going to learn these things, right? And that's the deeper level you can get out of it that matters for some the min-max type players that we have, that EVE is definitely like crack for. So I think it works on those levels too.
Yeah, there's a couple
to address what people are saying in the chat again. Right. It's when you're looking at the gameplay of an alliance and the culture, you have to look past. They bring a bunch of big expensive ships, or they flood the field with T1 frigates. That is not the essence of the alliance. That is a result of the essence of an alliance. So very rich, heavy theory crafting teams versus teams with a lot of people. This is not. It's not, to represent EVE gameplay better, you would have supers versus T1 frigates in the alliance tournament. You have to look past that to the real soul of the alliance. Like if you look at PL over its history again, like I said before, super capitals and titans, while PL are very, very known for that, PL are not a super capital titan. Like, if they exist or they don't exist, that doesn't remove PL from the game. PL, with the focus, are having campaign commanders. It's the theory crafting, meta busting, spying approach to the game that results in super capital dominance, that results in these weird, big, expensive fleet comps that other people tend to follow.
You said it earlier. You gotta sell me on it that way. The announcers have to basically go into the game to pull out that richness that will give the Alliance tournament context. Because what I see are a bunch of little things going on, and me being insulted by the names of alliances. I'm being trolled while I watch the Alliance tournament, and there's no alliances in it. There's just groups of 5 or 6 players that are a B team for some other alliance. And that to me is like, hey, this is a different game. I'm no longer attached to it. When I first watch these Alliance tournaments,
the job of the commentators, and it is really hard, and a lot of it is really hard because we only do it once a year. I'm not advocating it for doing more. I'm just saying this is one of the difficulties, because if we had a tournament with these alliances every 2 months, the storyline would be more coherent. You'd hear about it more often, you'd get more used to it. Whereas every year alliances can massively shift. It's B teaming and stuff has made the news because of the collusion between Camel and Hydra and that kind of thing. And before, years and years before, with Outbreak and
Hydra. We're not even talking about that stuff. And if we were, we would talk about, wow, that was an interesting way of sneaking it in, right? We're talking about the people who win Alliance tournaments keep winning Alliance tournaments because they're able to project with better ships that are only found in winning the Alliance tournament. So there's an inbuilt wealth.
Buy those. The Tuskers are a prime example of people who had not been involved and not won Alliance tournaments immediately were top 4 in every tournament they were involved in. Like they had like 1 or 2 people who had maybe a bit of experience. But they
one out of 64 teams once in 1 year, as opposed to the last 5 years, it is a counterpoint, but it's a very small group that can do that. So I think
more than any other year, this year, a little bit last year, especially this year, the Giants are dying. PL's out in the round of 16. Hydra barely made it to the finals. There were so many more new teams of new pilots, new to the tournament scene, getting up into the very last round. It has been a huge paradigm shift of old.
How many of those teams are carrying people from the other teams, like people who were in PL?
Well, this is the cool thing, right? So far more than ever, there's been splitting. So each team might have like 1 or 2 people from old, historically good Alliance team that are sharing their knowledge and spreading that. And the knowledge and the love of tournament play has spread to more and more players, more than ever before. For example, the Initiative, who are a fantastic team this year, they had a guy called Uklu or Uki or something like that. He is like super mega old school tourney guy. But the rest of the people on the Initiative team basically pretty much new to the tournament team. But he worked with them, he shared with them, and he's now got this new group of people. And they in future may stay on the Initiative team, they may go find their own teams, they may fly with other teams. But more than ever before in tournament history over the past year or two, we've had this tournament knowledge and experience and passion moving forward. Like back in 87, 88, Pandemic Legion were basically the only good team. The only team that tried really hard. They were the only team that knew what was going on. And that's why they won 3 in a row uncontested, and they didn't even it was so easy for them. Now every team has to fight so damn hard to get into the top 16.
RUR almost took out PL, and they were the Cinderella team. So there was some instances.
RUR are Hun Reloaded.
Yeah, Hun Reloaded fell into Nulli Segunda, which fell into NC Dot, I believe. So NC Dot's team really goes back to RUR, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, kind of and kind of not, in that the Shiva guys who were in Nulli, who learnt from the Hun guys, ended up in NC, but the actual Hun guys have ended up somewhere else, I think.
Free Gates, is that them? Anyway,
partially.
Totally took you off track. I'm sorry about that. I just wanted to show how things are related, because I think that's what needs to happen with the Alliance tournament. At least I am interested in the Alliance tournament. I was a very big fan of it. My first 3 articles were nothing but in deep dives about the Alliance tournament. I totally admire what you do. I admire what all these guys do. What aggravates me is I feel very separated from it. And I think that's where you're sensing my anger towards it, is because I used to love this thing. Why don't I love it anymore?
I mean, because it feels like if you're not in the Nullsec Alliance, you feel separated from the Nullsec meta. You can
yes.
Part of engagement is also on the side of the person who wants to engage.
I'll take your point. Yeah.
Again, if we had more ongoing tournament play, you'd start to see some of that coming out. Like EVE-NT, I think, is a great move in that direction, and I think having stuff like the Anger Games and other facets where you can have these chances for people to get into it and have a lower barrier to entry. Because honestly, AT is a huge commitment, like even just starting out, and especially for alliances that have no clue what's going on. We were lucky enough to get help coming in, so we actually weren't completely lost, and we still got our clocks cleaned most of the time.
A far higher percentage of the player base is interested and engaged with the tournament scene than before in EVE's history, because of things like regular EVE-NT and the Anger Games and the old RVB Cup. And also we've kind of had a renaissance since AT13 of having really competent commentators and media. Like the AT commentators were very, very hit and miss for years and years and years and years. But for some reason, and again, partially because EVE-NT giving people more opportunity to practice, more opportunity to pay attention, more players being involved with the tournament scene, meaning we can get more casters out of them. We have a much higher production quality, much more knowledge of people sharing this information. And one of the things I'm always begging tournament people to do is to put more articles, put more media out, to share, to give people that first step into the scene and realize how cool it is. Because as I say, we have already gotten so many new people into the tournament scene, so many more people interested in the tournament scene, and I'm one of them.
Yeah, no, and listen, you're a credit to the Alliance tournament. I could watch you comment on it quite a bit. I think when you started, though, I have to say I was really annoyed with you, but you've become very good. Because anybody who takes away time from Fozzie speaking when doing the Alliance tournament is annoying to me. So,
but the point is, Matt, that the proof that counters your argument is in people like Apotnik, people like Jintan, people like Rain. They all are so dedicated to the AT stuff, and then they also do all the other stuff. So there is a parallel.
Well,
you
do
have retention,
I think
and you have engagement.
You will struggle to find big FCs in EVE that aren't also super interested in the AT and involved. Like, for example, in Imperium, to stop talking about PL for once, you have Jay. What is it?
Amazingness.
Oh, amazing.
The guy that ran the Goons team this year. He's, one of the main Imperium FCs. He's involved. We had, Manny under Pake was in the AT. Tons of the PLFCs and content creators are involved in the PLAT team. Like in each alliance, it is the FCs and the content creators that are really interested in the stuff and that will drive people into that stuff. So, it is those people that get involved too.
Yeah, Asher Elias.
Asher Elias, not Jay. I apologize.
Yeah. Great guy, great podcast. You should listen into it if you can. Nothing but FC talk. Listen, you're a credit to the AT tournament, but when it did start, Caleb, just to push back a little bit, I don't know if people are attracted to the Alliance tournament as commentators because they love the stuff. I think it's an opportunity also to get yourself
saying
out.
That it's very different things that people mature into when they play EVE, right? They need some what you would call higher tier gameplay, and the AT is exactly that. For the ones that do not want to get into speculative market investment, don't want to get into administrative and leadership stuff, all these things, there's always something for everyone. It's just a matter of where they will trend towards when they come to the what you would call the end level. And the end level gaming is not having a Titan at all.
I know. There's no bias there. Listen, most of my time, I'll say this and probably get kicked out of NC, is not spent in NC. It's spent doing high-sec stuff, doing some low-sec stuff. It's doing what Noisy Gamer does, patrolling low-sec areas, not even to kill people. I don't kill people in low-sec. I just look around.
And that's just 30% of what you do. The rest of the time you're involved in the INN stuff, in creative departments, in creating the TV show. Right? All these things, all that is meta. That's the end-level stuff.
Yeah, right, and so this is another form of that. I get that. Okay, so
speaking of meta, can I add one more point, please?
Yes, sure.
To add something to what Apotnik was saying about Thunderdome, last year we organized an EVE Paris, and we set up the tournament, which was a mini version of the EVE-NT tournament with the EVE-NT rules, and that would not have been possible if Logic Bro hadn't given us Thunderdome access. So with those real-life events, even then Thunderdome can be a great help.
Yeah, we do those at the EVNT Nottingham and Antenna every time. Like we have mini tournaments there that are super fun.
I know.
Everybody likes to get involved in.
Yeah, I know. We had playtested the Fitz with Bay, and so I stole the Fitz from him and asked him for tips of the organizations. It was like a small-scale event. But the point being that Thunderdome was critical not just for tournament play, but for all these EVE meets.
Well, thanks for that. And let's actually wrap this up because we've gone over a bit. We did have some technical problems, so I thought we would go over it, and I'm glad you guys were all able to stay with us. Last thing I want to hit is, and this is not really, well, there's going to be an announcement on Monday, and by the time you hear this, most people, Monday would have passed, and so this won't really be anything that we're predicting or anything, but there seems to be more news coming out of CCP, and there's rumblings in the Metasphere about announcements and stuff like that. So we had a lot of fun just trying to figure out what we thought it might be. So because it hasn't happened yet, what do you guys think is going to happen Monday?
I actually think the more fun aspect of this week, which is also tied into that announcement that's supposed to be coming, is how many of the player base were just scrutinizing and researching all the things they could figure out about CCP, their business, their current position, who could be potential buyers. The scrutiny was amazing. I don't think any other game company out there suffers this level of scrutiny.
Well said.
I'm betting on a Project Nova release date, at least a time calendar window.
Well, we hear it's something inside of
it. I think that it is going to be something like maybe Serenity closing down, or basically, I think it's going to be something that, in terms of the Tranquility audience, that we will be very angry about for a week, then largely get over. I don't think it's going to be anything on the scale of the layoffs we just had. I don't think it's going to be round 2 of that. I think it's probably something that's going to be bad and annoying, but compared to recent events, nowhere near as bad.
Anyone else want to chime in?
Sure. On Monday, they will announce who is buying CCP Newcastle.
My guess would be that Seagull is actually quitting or stepping down.
Now we're talking. That's bigger headline news.
Stepping down, sorry?
Well,
Seagull.
Yeah, I told Matterall in a private chat earlier I thought that was going to happen, but I didn't want to say that out loud just in case she isn't.
Caleb.
Don't want to
that would be sad. Seagull is fucking amazing.
Yeah, she's not leaving.
Seagull is awesome.
She's not leaving. Okay, so this is just speculation on.
Yeah, because the part of the speculation is that, one, having kids is time consuming, and two, I don't know. CCP Seagull may be the longest serving executive producer in the history of EVE Online.
Really?
So we have.
She's been there over 3 years, like almost 3.5 now.
Well, the real argument would be, is she one of the types that might actually want to settle in her own country and bring up her children in there instead of in the north?
Let's back out of real life.
No, because she recently became an Icelandic citizen. So no.
Okay, that's taking my bet out off the table, I guess.
You're totally reverse it. Okay, so Roden says, and you guys in chat, you can write down what you think is going to happen on Monday. Material nerf on Monday.
Yeah, my prediction is that the sun will rise on Monday. Whatever comes on Monday, we can deal with on Monday.
Unless we have another Caroline Starr moment, then the sun may explode.
Let's be clear. This is all speculation about what we think is going to be announced Monday, because Monday there's supposed to be some big announcement. Actually, supposed to be multiple announcements, but one of them is going to be particularly important and apparently piss off a lot of people. And so watch Reddit. Here's my thing. I think they're going to basically. There's a few things I think might happen. One is there's going to be a Rorqual nerf. I don't know why I think that. I think maybe the mining stuff. 2, I don't know if that's the right one. 2 is I think they're going to officially stop communicating with Reddit. I don't know, maybe I'm just dreaming there. And what was the other ones? I had like 3 or 4 listed out, but I forgot them now. So all these sound wrong now that I say them. EA was going to buy CCP, was something people floated. They ended up buying who?
Respawn.
So they're not buying CCP unless they are in the buying mood.
That is usually how it goes. Usually they buy them in packs.
Yeah, EA wound up killing a studio and then buying a studio. They killed the studio that was going to be making a Star Wars game, and then they bought a studio that might be making a Star Wars game.
I think they're after that IP. Well, another thing that was floated was that they're going to stop pushing out the the API. Interesting.
What? That's dumb. They've just spent 2 years. You mean the XML API? Because that was announced a year ago.
Yeah, it probably would be the very, very old API system, not the ESI system that's working now.
If they were gonna make that a firm date and officially announce it and say we're ready, but even inside that team, they were already FanFest, and then at Vegas again, they were kind of like, well, we're still aiming for our timetable, but obviously we have to have parity, and we're not quite there yet. So, we may get an extra little time, but it's happening. And that's the big thing.
That may be it. I think that's a real contender, because that would annoy a certain group of people that get these third-party tools.
Not anyone that develops. Like I said, this was announced a year and a half or a full year ago already. We were given a date. We were given all of the information, and they have been super awesome about support as far as third-party development goes. I've been utterly shocked at how awesome CCP has been on that front.
Here was one of my predictions. I think they're going to allow. What do you call it? Alpha clones. You know how they're getting a boost to the amount of skills they can use. I think they're going to allow them to do PI.
Ooh, that would be super dangerous for a market that isn't particularly overheated.
I thought it was with whoever sold API or whoever sold PI in the last few weeks made a fortune.
Yeah, well, patch day with new structures is always going to be a thing, but you can't have a consistent output from free accounts driving that price down always.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a really dangerous thing to do, because you're going to end up with a salvage situation where it's worthless for most people to do it. And then when it's needed in high volumes, it's going to spike out through the roof. And all of a sudden, everyone's going to be like, oh, I can't afford to actually do anything. Structures.
Yeah. So these have all been speculations on what we think is going to happen Monday. By the time you hear this, you'll probably know, and it probably won't be as big as any of the stuff that we're talking about. But those are the things that we were kind of thinking about. Carneros, you're diplomatically quiet.
I don't have a prediction.
That's what I thought. The smart man and the smart money to have no prediction. All right. I think that we're pretty much done. Is there anything else? We didn't cover the one of the things I wanted to cover we didn't cover on this long show is the Garista shipyard. Does anybody run into them yet? Or the forward operating bases?
HiSec. Ew.
Yeah. Yeah. No, nobody has. All right. Well, listen, we got off an hour early to some people because time has changed. So I want to remind you, we're going to stick with 1500 UTC until further notice. So this show is on at 7 a.m. Pacific time, 10 a.m. Eastern time in the U.S. So everything stays the same. So if you came an hour late, don't worry, just listen to or it's on VOD here, and we'll be on YouTube as well. Do you guys have any other comments that you guys want to make before we close out the show?
Haven't we talked enough yet?
Oh, yeah. Well, we continue to talk even after the show in the Discord. So if you can get into Talking in Stations Discord, this is where we hang out most of the time, and definitely after shows. To wrap up, I want to say thanks to the panel that showed up today, and especially Opner and Le Routier. Say it one more time with your French accent.
Le Routier.
I gotta learn how to do that accent. Anyway, really nice having you on the show. Seamus, thanks for showing up. Sorry we tricked you with the hour.
No worries.
And that's everything we got. Thanks. 2 hours. Great. Had a lot of fun. That's it for this week. We will see you next week on Talking in Stations.
Fly safe.